My name's Ariane, I'm a healer and life coach. Welcome to Ariane Talks. In this episode 1, we are going to talk about why we feel the way we do. So my job as a healer essentially is to teach people how to heal themselves from the challenges they have in life and why they feel the way they do. So with that, most of what I do is explore the experiences we've had in our lives which have led us to feeling the way we do. Whether that feeling is anger, whether that feeling is guilt, whether that feeling is jealousy, whether it's having high levels of anxiety, whether if it's we feel like we can't handle certain parts of our lives, or we're suffering from codependency or anything like that. Now, today's episode is going to concentrate more on just getting an overviewing kind of like understanding of why we do feel like that, not on the individual level necessarily, but more around how humans work, why humans get to a place where in our adulthood we have a lot of anxiety, why we are always under stress, why we have the beliefs about ourselves we do, why we have the thoughts about ourselves that we do. So as a human being, there are ways that you work. What I mean by that is the best kind of way that I can kind of describe that is think about it as like a computer program, or if you were a robot, you would have a computer program. There would be rules in how you would work. Exactly the same way as if you were going to have open heart surgery, there would be specific rules that would need to be taken into place for that to actually happen and be successful. So for example, you would need blood transfusion. You know, there are certain ways that you would need to detach the heart, or maybe if you're having a replacement of a heart, there are rules in how we work emotionally and mentally as well. And through experiences that we have, we actually learn certain things, and that's on the individual level. Again, one person could have the same experience as another person, but learn something completely different. Now, think of it as like programs. So all your experiences create learning programs. Through our childhood, we grow up and we have experiences. Most of the experiences we have through our childhood that make us learn things that would set us up for the rest of our lives happen early on, mainly up to the age of 8. But that does continue after that as well. You know, we can even have experiences that happened last week that can program us to think a certain way. But most of them that stick, that are the core wounds that we would have, the core childhood wounds, are at the earlier stages of our lives. Now, we are a relationally dependent species. That means we actually use relationships as a survival mechanism. An infant on their own would 100% die. If you left an infant in the street, every single time it would die. We're actually born 3 months premature as well. So because of that, we've actually evolved to use relationships, connection, love as a survival mechanism. So it's ingrained in our DNA. Now, what that means is that if we have any experiences that go against that, we biologically and through evolution, we actually feel annihilation. We feel like we're going to die, like death. Those experiences create the survival mind to kick in, and then we have to cope somehow. We have to be able to deal with it and handle it somehow. So I suppose the most kind of like glaring out there reason of why we would feel any sort of annihilation or anything like that is due to our upbringing. Now, society's way of bringing children up still to this day is pretty outdated. In the 1600s, we introduced a social control technique, which was the good behavior reward, bad behavior punishment. Now, in the 1600s, this was necessary because there was a lot of humans that obviously there was a lot of out of control, and we needed to control it. So it was a social control technique. Now, this technique in itself is, if you behave good, I will reward you, but if you behave bad, I will punish you. So you can learn what good behavior is, so I can control and make sure that you're doing what I want you to do. Now, that's a very subjective way of being. One person's good might be very, very different to another person's good. So it's not necessarily black and white. There is no good and bad. Good and bad is based on subjective belief. Someone from Asia might think good is very, very different than someone from England. So we're brought up based on what our caregivers believe to be good and believe to be bad. Now, again, this is pretty outdated, because what happens to us in the moment if we do something that would be bad necessarily, or subjectively thought about as being bad, we would get scolded. And this is, we've grown up, and our parents have, our caregivers have, and their caregivers have, and so on, believing that this is the way to teach. And it brings a lot of negativity with it. It brings a lot of problems with it as well. Because if you're scolding a child, at that point, you as the caregiver, you're the god of the reality of the child. Again, we would be dead without our caregivers. So we look at our caregivers as the gods of our reality. Without them, we are dead. Through evolution, it makes us feel like we're going to die. So if this god of reality of yours was to scold you and also tell you that you're feeling incorrectly and you shouldn't feel like that. Now, to touch up on feelings is who we are. I know through societal way of socializing and the upbringing we've had, we've literally learned to ignore our feelings, but it's who we are in the moment. So if you feel sad, that's who you are. If you have to hide feeling sad, you're hiding who you are in that moment. So I want you to start thinking of feelings as a true, authentic representation of who you are. And who you are in moments can change and will change and does. So in the moment, if we act jealous, or if we act angry, or if we act upset, and in that moment, if we're being told not to be that and not to be who we are, we're getting that communication is being sent to us in a way that the love is taken away as well, because that's what scolding is. Scolding is love has been taken away. You're not doing what I want you to do, therefore the love has been taken. Now in that moment, we have thoughts and beliefs, and subconsciously we recognize that this is dangerous, because the love that we rely on for survival has been taken away. And also the God of my reality is scolding me, is actually kind of against who I authentically am in that moment. So what this does is it creates your survival mind to kick in, which is actually what trauma is. In that moment, it's defined as trauma. Trauma itself is distress without resolve. I have made an entire video of trauma where I go in depth to what actually happens to us. I will put that in the description, the link of that in the description. Go check that out. When trauma occurs, now trauma is not something that only happens when big things happen. We tend to think that trauma is only when there's been like a death in the family, or sexual abuse, or near death experience, or big car crash or something like that. It's not. Trauma happens to all of us so much more than you would think. It's such a normal, regular thing that happens to a human being. Now, in the time of trauma, what happens is that our consciousness splits, and we have two different aspects of ourselves. And everything we do, every behavioral direction and path we go down, is to do with staying safe. So in the moment of trauma, we would take on an aspect out of those two aspects of ourselves. We would take on the aspect that would keep us safe in that moment, and we would put the other one somewhere we don't have access to, because we don't want to feel the feelings that other aspects have, because in that moment to feel those feelings is unsafe. So we put it somewhere we don't have access to, which is our subconscious. Now, this happens a lot. This is when the survival mind kicks in, and it happens a lot throughout our lives. But again, our caregivers are unaware this has happened to them, so there's no blame being placed on anyone here. This is kind of like a collective understanding of we've all been through this. So what happens in that moment is we feel very, very unsafe. So we have to do anything we can in order to feel safe. So we dissociate, we split our consciousness, and we take on the aspect of the aspect that's going to keep us safe. Now, our minds are built to only deal with complete life experiences, and trauma, being distress without resolve, is not a complete life experience. So this aspect that's in your subconscious will remain in your subconscious until it is resolved, until it is a complete life experience. So we grow up and we have, we get out of our childhood, we go in our adulthood, and these aspects are still there. And because through our experience, and we've not really known what's been going on, we have multiple experiences where we've been scolded, not necessarily by our caregivers. It could be by a stranger in the park or something, or we might have an experience where it might be very, very traumatic for us because there might be a death in the family, or we might, simply crashing our bikes and having that fear is enough to activate that survival mind. So once you get a more understanding, or a better understanding of what trauma is, you'll realize that you've been through hundreds and hundreds of experiences throughout your life, depending on what experiences you've had. Some people, thousands and thousands of experiences, where you have thousands and thousands of aspects of yourself that need reintegrating, that need to have that complete life experience. Now, our minds and body try to get these aspects of ourselves resolved by pushing them up to the surface from our subconscious. And this is what we call anxiety. Anxiety is a mask of a suppressed emotion. Anxiety itself is not an actual emotion. So our minds and body try to get these resolved, but because they carry the feelings that we've never wanted to feel, and we don't, what we do is we actually push them away. That's what we've been doing our entire lives. So we continue doing that thing that we were doing, which is pushing them away. Healing is to go in the opposite direction. It's to not push them away. It's to invite them in. It's to reintegrate them, so you can complete that life experience. Now, when you do that, the anxiety goes. Those feelings that you don't want to feel have been felt and released, so they're no longer there. So the more aspects of yourself that you reintegrate, the less anxiety you're going to feel, the less anger you're going to feel, the less jealousy you're going to feel, the less guilt you're going to have, because you're going to get a better understanding about yourself. When you accept yourself for who you are and be completely okay with how you feel, then all of these things fall into place. Everything becomes better. Now, we start to learn at a very early age. So we'll have an experience where, let's say maybe someone who cries or is angry. If you're angry as a child and you get scolded for being angry, you get told off and the love gets taken away, and that survival mind kicks in the moment of anger. After a while, you learn that it's not safe and not okay to be angry. So you learn to suppress the anger that you've ever had. And anytime in the future you get angry, you automatically suppress it. And now what happens is that anger will build and build and build inside of you. And then maybe when you're in your adulthood, the slightest thing gets you angry. Or maybe it goes the opposite way, where you actually can't get angry. You can't feel angry. Just things happen in your life, and maybe some people have said, like, doesn't that make you angry? But you've learned that it's not safe to be angry. So it's not authentic. Feelings are who we are. They're a guidance system. They're a guidance system to what you do like, what you don't like, what is safe, what is not safe. Now, if you've had we all fall into the category of learning to ignore our guidance system. And now we live in a world where we think certain behaviors are normal. We think having stress is normal. We think people who have anxiety is normal. These are not normal states of being. There are reasons why we have anxiety. It's like emotionally bleeding. If your skin was cut open and you could see the blood come out, you would give it attention. Anxiety is like that emotionally. Anxiety is like emotionally bleeding, but because everyone around us just gets on with it and pushes through it, we think that it's normal just to have anxiety. Everyone around us is stressed. Stress is stress is when your body has fallen out of alignment. The stress response, when you feel the stress, is your body's attempt to trying to get you back into alignment. Again, it's something that needs attention. Why am I under stress? What is this stress coming from? Where is it coming from? It's being triggered from an aspect of myself that I've been denying since I was 4 years old. Now, the way we get rid of these again is by healing, by understanding, by being the most authentic us. What we do is we push away these aspects of ourselves. And these are parts of ourselves. So when we don't want to feel anxiety, when we don't want to feel these undesirable feelings, we're pushing them away. That means we're pushing a part of ourself away. We're pushing an aspect of ourself away. And that's self-hate. That's where self-hate comes from. We hate feeling those feelings, but there's still aspects of ourselves. So healing is to practice self-love and be completely, unapologetically accepting of who we are. The more authentic we are, the more healed we're becoming. So if you're getting to a stage where you're absolutely accepting of you feeling any way you do, you're becoming more authentically who you are. We can't control how we feel as humans. We can't. I always give the example to people, I always say, right, I want you to feel terrified right now. Feel absolutely terrified, where your heart is racing and you can't even concentrate on anything. Everything's panicky. Go, do it now. Do it now. Go. And every single person I've said that to has gone, I can't. Because you can't. But if someone was to break in wherever you are now and then punch you in the face and would knock you to the ground, you would be absolutely terrified. Your heart would be racing. You'd be like panicky, like what's going on? Even if you could stick up for yourself or not, your entire state, the way you feel, would instantly change. And that's because of the experience, because of what's happening to you. So you can't turn on and turn off your feelings. We've been brought up to think that we feel wrong, or we should feel a certain way, or we shouldn't feel a certain way. Now, should and shouldn't are very, very subjective. And it's the way that generations have been brought up for the longest time. And that's not who we are. That's not how we work as humans. So we carry these beliefs of, oh, I'm feeling silly. No, I shouldn't feel like that. That's really, really silly of me. I know I shouldn't feel like that. Like, no, you should. Even if you don't want to feel a certain way about something, don't ever think that you should or you shouldn't. That's not the goal. The goal is, all right, I feel like this about this thing. Why do I feel like this about this thing? I don't want to necessarily feel like this about this thing. So I'm going to explore why I do. And then hopefully that will make me arrive at a place where I can let go and feel differently about this subject. But to think that you shouldn't or you should feel a certain way is a very, very unrealistic expectation that you'd be putting on yourself, because that's what happened to us. That's what we learned. That's what was programmed into us. Growing up, we're like these brand new, like, computers, let's say, and we're learning, and everything that we're learning are programs. And we were programmed to think that we should feel a certain way, or we shouldn't feel a certain way, based on someone's subjective beliefs and opinions. There is no one's come here and gone, this is the way things are, you should be like this. Like, everyone has their own opinion. My opinions are very, very different to someone else's opinions. But you shouldn't necessarily put an expectation like that on yourself. It's not realistic. There's no end goal. You grow up with these programs, and this is why when we arrive somewhere in our adulthood, we end up beating ourselves up because we're not living up to the unreal expectation. Unreal expectation, it doesn't exist. You cannot change the way you feel. You can't. So you literally, there's cultivating more self-hate, and you just keep beating yourself up. So the goal is to accept yourself. Accept yourself. It doesn't matter how you feel. Even if you think it's morally wrong, that's fine. You can change how you feel. You can heal from it. But to absolutely not accept how you feel is not the way to go. So the answer is healing. The answer is figuring out why you feel like that. Now, the best way to do that healing is shadow work. Essentially, all of these aspects that we've put into our subconscious, we've put in the shadow aspect. It's like the shadow aspect. It's like the shadow side of us. So shadow work means that we go into into that part of ourselves where we don't know what we don't know. So we figure out. Now, the best way to start this is by, what we tend to do is we get triggered by people. So we think, this person made me feel like that. But everything in your life, every experience you have in your life is actually neutral. It's the meaning we give to it which trigger those feelings to us. So for example, I used the example earlier of two gardeners and a rainy day. So if it was a rainy day, one gardener, and both gardeners can't work now, one of them might be really, really annoyed about that because he was really looking forward to working and he really likes working and he's actually not able to make any money today. The other gardener might actually be really, really happy because he doesn't necessarily like his job that much and he likes the fact that he doesn't have to go to work. So the rainy day itself is neutral. Each gardener gave different meaning to it, which made them feel different. So if someone is behaving in a certain way and that triggers something in us, it's because of the meaning we've given to that behavior. That behavior might be something, and it might make us feel that we're not good enough, which would be a core wound. It might make us feel abandoned, which again would be something from our past. It might make us feel like we're not lovable because someone may have not returned a text as soon as we thought they would, or as soon as we'd like them to. And that makes us feel annoyed and angry at them. But it depends on the meaning. The meaning we might give to that is that I'm not lovable, or maybe they're off with someone else, or maybe they're not interested. Maybe I'm not worthy enough for this. And these are the meanings that make us feel like this. Now, unconsciously, what we do in that moment is we project our feeling, whether it's anger or fear or something. We kind of go, right, that's the reason. That person is the reason that I feel like this. But you are responsible for your emotions and how you feel, just like everyone else is responsible for how they feel. So the best way to start healing is to look within yourself. Not out there, not at this person or that person, regardless whether they did something that would make you feel a certain way. The best start, the only start to healing, is to look at yourself. Now, I was actually forced into this. When I started my healing journey, I went through a lot of experiences that eventually forced me to look at why is this happening again? Why are my relationships always repeating the same thing over and over again? Why do they end the same way over and over again? And I was forced to look at myself. I didn't look at myself before that, but once the last time I was in a relationship and that ended, it made me look at myself. Because you respond, you react, you have beliefs, you feel a certain way towards a situation based on your programming, based on your experience. So if you've gone through life learning that love isn't safe, or learning that everyone abandons me, or learning that you're not worthy, or learning that you're not good enough. And I say learning, but it's actually programmed. If you have these programs inside of you, your response and your reaction to experiences that you have today are very, very different, and are going to make you feel very, very different. So if you are struggling with your partner, or if you're struggling with your co-worker or your boss or your family, your sibling, your parents, your friends, your children, because of their actions, which is making you feel a certain way, the reason of that is because you're giving a specific meaning to that experience. And that meaning is driven by your past experiences, programming. So the first step to healing, essentially, is to look at those programming, learn what these programs are, learn what core wounds do I have, what are my beliefs. All beliefs are thoughts that are thought over and over again. When you think something over and over again, it becomes a belief. Now we have this misconception that a belief is based on truth, and it's not. If someone was mentally unstable, they would look at a tree maybe and think that it's a lion, and they would truly believe that. The belief system is just another part of your body, of your psyche, of your vehicle. It's not based on truth. It's actually based on, it's subjective. So we have these beliefs that we're not good enough, that are in our subconscious. We have these beliefs that, we're not worthy. We're not worthy of love. We're not good enough. We're not able to get it. We're abandoned. And these beliefs are what drives these feelings, these emotions from these aspects. So we can change a belief. We can change every single belief that you have. And they're all subjective. So what that means is you are good enough to be loved for just who you are. You don't have to change yourself to be loved. That's a programming that has been put into you because of the experiences you've had, because of the upbringing that you've had. There are ways to not feel the way you do, and it is healing. You have to go through healing, but you have to start the journey. These aspects will not go away on their own. I always use the example of physical trauma. If you fell out of a tree and broke your legs, you would need to give attention to those broken legs. Mental trauma is the same, as in you need to give attention to it. These beliefs don't just change on their own. These aspects do not get reintegrated on their own. And time doesn't heal necessarily just time on its own. Time just makes you, without healing, time just makes you really good at ignoring these aspects of yourself, ignoring these feelings. Sometimes I speak to people, and I have some clients that they've gotten so good at not feeling, they're actually working towards and relearning how to feel these emotions again. So you've got to be really, really conscious of the fact that you might have learned or been programmed not to feel, which is a survival mechanism. Again, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing anything wrong. This is just how you've been programmed. So the path is healing. I think that's about it really for this episode. It is my first episode, and I think we got to some really, really good points. I'm glad that I was able to do this, and if you have taken anything away from this, then that's great. I am working currently on an online course where I will be teaching a lot about all the information that I've learned, which is kind of going to be like a huge step forward in your healing journey at the beginning, so you get an overall understanding of how you work individually. My job is to teach you how to heal yourself. You absolutely have the power to be able to heal yourself. For being a living human being, you have that ability and you have that power. So thank you again. If you want, follow me on my social media. I do post videos regularly to try and kind of plant seeds in your head, to try and teach a little bit more about these sides of ourselves and what's happening, and kind of get a better understanding of our whole like this vehicle that we're riding in, and trying to get an understanding of that. I also host online meditations through Zoom. In these meditations, they are actually specifically designed to be healing to certain aspects. So there are 3 at the moment. These meditations are Learn to Let Go, Becoming the New You. In this meditation, we align with new thoughts, so we're not continuing the old thought patterns of the old us. We have to evolve into the new healed version of ourselves. There's Activate Your Heart, Becoming the Love that you naturally are. We have experiences in life where we learn that things aren't safe, so what we do is we close our heart and we kind of go like, no, well, I learned that happened, I'm not going to do that again. So this meditation is designed to actually open your heart again, which in turn will actually reflect to experience more love in your life. And the third one is the Inner Child Healing Meditation. Now, the Inner Child is actually something that it kind of deserves its own podcast episode. So maybe the next one, I'll talk about the inner child and what it actually is and how we can use it, and how we need to treat ourselves, essentially, which is how we treat the inner child. I think that's it for this episode. That was my first episode, and I'm super glad that I've actually got this on the way, and I hope you guys got some value out of this. I would love to hear from you. So if you're listening on a platform where you can put anything in the comment section, please do. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you have any questions or anything, just send them my way and I will try and answer them. The MeetUp group, I will put links of that in the description, but everything can be found on my website, which is ariansamouie.com. That's spelled ariansamouie.com. And all my social links and everything are in the footer at the bottom of the page. That's me for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully I will see you next time.